Welcome to Scary Town. This week we're going to be veering off and reviewing a different series in the Goosebump line. It is called Horrorland. Um, After the classic series ended, R.L. Stine took he didn't do anything for Goosebumps related for 10 years, and then he brought back the series with Horrorland, which is based on the 16th book, I believe, in the classic Goosebumps series, One Day in Horrorland. It's it's a horror-themed amusement park, and it's one of my favorite of the classic series, that and Monster Blood. Today we're going to be reviewing Revenge of the Living Dummy, which is, get a good look at that. And so these books are structured, there's a visual 12 books in the series, but they decided to continue along with it. So the first 12 is the first arc of the Horrorland story. And each one can be a standalone story, but they have like a very short second part to it where the kids in the story are given a free pass to Horrorland, and you know stuff happens and it continues. Like in this book, it starts and then in the next, and it ends with a cliffhanger, and so you have to wait and read the second book to find out what happens to the kids. It's a pretty cool idea, because Horrorland was one of the most popular Goosebumps books, and it spawned a video game and an official sequel. I think it was in Goosebumps 2000, and it's just a fun concept, just a horror themed amusement park. I really like the idea, and so this is like a twofer with this first book, because it's Revenge of the Living Dummy, and Slappy is like practically the mascot of the series of Goosebumps. He's had, I think it might be tied with Monster Blood with like the most sequels um, in the series, and he's just, I mean, he's always there. Like at Comic-Con last year, like he was the first one that showed up with Jack Black on the Comic-Con panel. So he's identifiable. Everyone likes him. He's just not particularly like super dangerous, but he's very intelligent, and he's just funny to see him insult people and that kind of stuff. So this is like, they came out of the gates really strong. Like taking Horrorland is very popular, and then Slappy's super popular, so it's just, they hit you really quick. So the story, it starts out sort of differently than the usual Goosebumps, where it's just dives you in, and it's like, okay, these are the main characters, and this is what's going on. This one starts with a flashback that you don't understand what's the significance to the plot until later on. But it starts out with the main character, Brittany, and her best friend Molly, who are there digging up a plot in the cemetery, and they're gonna bury this thing in a glass case. It's a shrunken head, and they're like trying to bury it, and then the chapter ends, and it goes like 2 weeks earlier. Brittany's cousin Ethan is going to be living with her family for a while, and Ethan, like, I'm not too far into the Goosebumps series, but so far this guy is like the most annoying kid in the Goosebumps series, because the things he does, and ultimately the twist of the book, it makes him like a complete despicable character with no redeemable qualities whatsoever, other than he's just a little kid. So you're like, I can't hate him too much. But yeah, I actually made a list of the things, the horrible things he's done. So, number one, he kicks Brittany and other kids when parents aren't looking. He once tried to trip Brittany so she could fall down the stairs, which is, I'll come back to that, because he actually kind of did that. He succeeded the second time around, but we'll get back to that. He tricked Brittany into eating a sandwich with dead bugs in it. I don't. That's really wrong. What? I don't know how I got away with that. He also was messing with Brittany's computer and inadvertently caused her term paper to be deleted. And then it involves the twist, but he caused Brittany to be slapped in the face with Slappy's hand, and Slappy's ventriloquist dummy, and it's wood, and so it hurt enough, slapped her on the forehead, so that she needed a an ice pack and that kind of thing. And so Ethan is horrible, terrible kid. He brings with him the infamous ventriloquist dummy that has like a chipped lower lip. We all know him as Slappy, but this time around, Ethan has called him the groan-inducing, really, this is what they decided to call him, bad boy, Mr. Bad Boy. And kind of like his one-liners like, I'm a bad boy. So that doesn't get old at all. So he immediately comes in and just kind of starts being annoying, insulting his mom and stuff, but making it look like Mr. Bad Boy is doing the insults and stuff. Which kind of the cool thing about this story is you don't really need to know about him in order to enjoy it. So there's not any really any continuity that you really need to worry about. So so it kind of culminates, and very quickly Brittany comes to realize that Mr. Bad Boy is actually alive, and he's out to get her. She has this framed poster of this music group. I'm blanking on the name, but it has the lead singer, and she's he has his shirt off, and he has tattoos, and she's a teenage girl, and so this appeals to her, obviously. But Ethan comes by and checks out the poster, and then Mr. Bad Boy says, hey, I really like that band too, and I want that poster. And he's just like, no, you can't have it. It's mine, And then later, she hears a crash from upstairs, and she rushes over, and she finds the case is just, it fell down, and it's the glass is broken. She also has this painting she made of the family dog that died a year ago, and there's she's painting on mustache on the dog, and she's really upset about this, and this is where she confronts Ethan about it, because at first she believed he was just playing a joke on her, but then it's revealed that the dummy Slappy is behind all of it. So after all that's going on, Molly invites Brittany over to her dad's house. Brittany's mom really is like adamant about like getting Brittany and Ethan to get along because Ethan has kind of like a bad childhood. Like his parents were like really sick and they weren't able to take care of him, and kind of goes into like maybe that's why he's kind of a little brat. So she wants them both to get along, and so it's like you should take him along to Molly's, and it's like okay fine, takes him along. Molly's dad is this adventurer, like Indiana Jones kind of type of guy. Goes on expeditions and brings back all these crazy artifacts and stuff. And he has this one in particular he wants to show them upstairs. And they kind of don't want to go at first. They're like, nah, that's fine. And he's like, no, you guys won't be disappointed. So it takes them up there, and there's all these like creepy dolls and these embalmed snakes and all this weird stuff. And in this glass case, there's this shrunken head called the Mind Stealer. And legend goes that if it's close enough to somebody and it looks them in the eye, it has the power to just basically mind wipe them. So like they're just like a vegetable, like completely clean slate. And when the kids ask the dad, is like, do you actually believe it has the power to do this? And he's like, I guess so. And they're all like really freaked out about it. And so that's kind of it for that. However, there's interesting little tidbit that's going to come up later. The dad like is kind of interested in the dummy. Is like, At first he's like looking at it, it's like, that's an interesting dummy. He's like, I feel like I've seen that dummy before. I can't put my finger on it. And so that's important, and it's going to come up later. So that's the end of that. Brittany has this, she's been doing work at a retirement home. Like she goes and kind of does a demonstration on how to paint. And she her mom like kind of pushes her into like getting Ethan involved, because Ethan had shown Brittany like his comedy routine. It just goes into Mr. Bad Boy, just like it's insult comedy where it's just you pick out somebody in the crowd and you just start insulting them. Ethan go to the retirement home. Brittany does her thing, she's painting, and she gets like a few comments from the crowd. This like, oh, you should come over and paint my house and stuff like that. There's like one lady's like, oh, I can't hear you, and then another lady's like, oh, she's deaf, like she can't hear you no matter how loud you talk, and that kind of thing. And she paints like this beautiful sunset, and afterwards like everyone gets up, claps and cheers, and even the people who were interrupting her were like, yeah, that's pretty good. And then so Ethan does his comedy routine and starts insulting the audience, and like really bad jokes, essentially like, oh, is like trying to remember, like, oh, is that, did you take out the garbage, or is that your face, and stuff like that. And then at one point he calls for a volunteer from the audience. Like this old lady comes by, and then the paints and supplies and stuff are nearby, and he kind of insults her at first, but then he's like, oh, hold on, like I'm in good, because the administrator of the retirement home's like not having any of this, as it's just really terrible, insulting all these poor old people. And then so like he does a thing where like he grabs a jar of some red paint and just like tosses it up in the air, and then like it splashes over this old lady's dress, and he grabs a jar of yellow paint and then does the same thing, and it's like that's pretty much the showstopper. And then there's like after that they're like kicked out, like kind of like sulking in her room, and she's talking to Molly, telling her about the whole thing, how she got grounded by her parents because the administrator of the retirement home basically blames the whole thing on her, even though Ethan's the one that caused all the trouble. She puts the blame on her, saying that she must have known exactly what kind of comedy routine he was going to do. She knew what the jokes were going to be, and so she's responsible for what happened. And so she's grounded. She's talking to Molly, and then she also adds in like I think the dummy is real, like he's alive, and she's like, oh, this is fine. And then after a day or so, Molly calls her Brittany in the middle of the night, and so I've got this call from this expert about the Mind Stealer shrunken head, saying that it needs to be buried and as soon as possible, because the power is so dangerous of it. It needs to be taken away, and the only way to get rid of it is to bury it in a cemetery. And so she storms off, gets dressed, and then meets her in the cemetery, and then they start digging a hole so they can bury the glass case, the Mind Stealer. And of course, Ethan comes by, like he's hiding behind the tombstone, and he grabs Brittany's leg, trying to scare her. And he does this throughout the book, and he plays tricks on her and stuff. And then so they start burying it and stuff. And then that's kind of it, and then they leave. Brittany goes to her parents and then tries to convince them, Mr. Bad Boy's behind the whole thing, he's alive and stuff, and they're not hearing any of it, of course. Classic Goosebumps. The parents never understand. And so a big thing happens where about to go downstairs, and Ethan calls out hey, watch out, watch out behind you. And then Mr. Bad Boy pushes her down the stairs, and she doesn't fall all the way down, she falls halfway down the stairs, but she's still pretty hurt. And and later she confronts Ethan about it. It's you should have done that. And it's hey, it's not my fault. It's he tries to look like he's being controlled by the dummy, saying it's telling me to do these things, and it says it's going to hurt me if I don't do these things. And then later she goes into Ethan's room to look at the dummy, and then it basically comes up to her and then whispers in her ear you should never have snitched on me, and that was basically the warning, just tossing her down, pushing her down the stairs. So and then it does a whole thing where she tries to she keeps on trying to tell her parents about him, but they still don't want to listen. And then then she goes she asks her, Molly, is remember the dad had kind of recognized the dummy. He was well, and he's she goes over to Molly's house, and they look through some files of her dad, and then finds this file called ventriloquism, and looks through stuff, and then she finds a black and white photo Mr. Bad Boy, and to find out his name is Slappy. And they find on the back there's these magic words. It's like, if you say these words, you can stop the dummy, like expel him. It kind of shows his origin, like he was created by this sorcerer in like the 1800s. He used like stolen coffin's wood to make the dummy, and there's two dummies, and then they were both equally evil, but one of them was destroyed, and so Slappy was the one that survived, and he became even more evil and powerful because he was the only one left. And then so there's like, okay, finally we have a way to stop him. And then she goes into the room while Ethan's away, and the dummy's just kind of there, upright on a chair, and as like she kind of like insults him at first and trying to goad him, but like he doesn't move. And so she pulls out the photo and then recites the magic words, and then kind of like the dummy kind of like slumps down, like his head falls down, and then it's like, oh, okay, so that worked. And then all of a sudden Molly's in the room with her, and she's kind of like looking around, and then she finds this tape recorder, or this remote control device, and Ethan's blue jeans, and it's like there's a bunch of red buttons on there, and she starts pressing them, and each one is a voice recording that goes back to like everything Mr. Bad Boy has said is all part of it's all pre-recorded. So they're like, that's the big twist. They think Slappy has been alive this whole entire time, but it was all Ethan playing a big joke on them, and he's been behind everything. So that shows he was responsible for pushing her down the stairs and all this stuff. It's really bad. And spoilers, he doesn't get any comeuppance at all. That's kind of like it for him, and because Slappy basically takes over, and they find out that the magic words that were opposed to, if he was alive, were gonna, depower him, actually brings him to life. So he's like, oh, thanks. He's like, oh, thanks, slave. It's like, now you're gonna like do whatever I say now. And it's like, why should I do anything you say? It's like, I'm gonna hurt you. It's like your parents are never gonna believe you. So it's like, you have no choice. And then she still refuses. And then he mentions the shrunken head. It was buried because he was, even though he was not conscious, his mind was still working. So he knew what was going on. He's like, hey, if you're not going to help me, I'm going to go after the mind stealer myself, and I'm going to dig it up and use it on you, and you're going to be my completely controlled mind slave. And so it's raining outside, and so he jumps out the window and then starts going after it, and she's all like kind of freaking out. So her mom's downstairs. She's like watching some dumb movie or whatever, and so she sneaks out the front door, and then confronts the Slappy in the cemetery. And then like she's hiding in the bushes, kind of like watching him, kind of like dig it up, and he's using his hands for like, he's like, oh, his hands make really good shovels because it's made out of wood, and it's like, and she's waiting for the right moment, and then she like jumps out of the bushes and tackles him, and then they kind of like have a wrestle a little bit, and then she gets the bright idea of grabbing Slappy and then like throwing him into the glass case, so it like head first, and then his eyes are like locked in with the mind stealer, and so it zaps him of his mind, and so he falls limp, and then that's kind of it. And then her parents apparently were following her the whole entire time. Because I mean, she went out the front door, so it would be pretty easy to notice that. And so they followed her, and then they're like, "Hey, what are you doing with Ethan's dummy and everything? You know, you're like in big trouble and all this stuff." And it's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. You know, I'll explain everything, and you know, we don't have to worry about anything." And then she's like, "Oh, hold on 1 second. I just need to take care of something real quick." And then she goes back, and then she dumps all the dirt back into and fill up the hole. And then they've already taken the dummy away. And then while she's walking away, she hears the voice of Slappy from the shrunken heads, like, you know, "I'll come back, you know." It's like, "I'll remember this and, you know, have a revenge." And that's why it's called Revenge of the Living Dummy. The story, before we go into the Horrorland, I think it was really effective in you believing that the dummy is actually real and alive, and kind of it plays with your emotions, because at first you're thinking Ethan's like this, you know, well, he's a horrid little monster, but you know, it kind of plays with you because it's like, oh, Slappy's controlling him, and maybe he, you know, is kind of feels some sympathy for him, that he's being controlled by this monster. And then the whole twist is like he's been controlling the whole thing with the remote, having recordings and everything. So the whole thing was a big prank, and it really messed with me, because I was really believing like, oh, Slappy's alive and he's been doing all this stuff, and then you find out, you know, Ethan's just been a little turd the whole time. So that was interesting. And then the whole thing with, at first, the subplot of the mind stealer was like, because that's the very first chapter, and you're like, what does this have to do with anything? This is kind of interesting. But I knew it was gonna link, like Slappy was gonna see this was something he wants to use against people. And then, but for a while it was just like he didn't make his move, and then once he comes to life, he's like, you know, immediately beelines to get it. And I really like the character of Brittany. She was like, she's trying to battle like Ethan. Like part of her, like, well, I would say like 3/4 of her really hates Ethan, but then part of her like kind of wants to believe that he's, you know, like in trouble, and there's a possibility for him to be redeemed, and she wants to help him. But you know, that kind of just thrown away. She's, you know, after the reveal. And I like the friendship of her and Molly, and Molly's dad. That was pretty interesting character. Her parent, the mom's like kind of a klutz, and that's kind of like the only personality quirk she really gets. She keeps dropping stuff and saying like, "Oh, how could I have dropped this?" And that's kind of it. The dad is kind of like just pretty generic. There's really nothing too interesting about him. And Ethan really kind of steals the show. He's just like at when it's kind of introducing the idea of him going to be staying with Brittany. It was just like, there's, what is it, like 1,000 or so people that like I possibly hate, and he's like number one on the list. It's just, you know, he's done all these horrible things, and like nobody likes him. And then after the twist, you're like, wow, you're kind of disappointed that he doesn't get any comeuppance. He doesn't get punished at all. I mean, he's kind of like the lesser evil at this point, because, you know, the living dummy. He's going after the mind stealer, so that's just kind of thrown away. And so I liked all the insults that Slappy was using against people. It's pretty funny. It kind of it kind of shows like a little bit of escapism. Like, what if you had like free reign and like no repercussions, and you just can like openly like insult people and say whatever you want. It's pretty liberating, and so you kind of empathize a little bit with him. Like, he's like this little scamp, but he's just like, it would be cool to be in his shoes and just kind of go crazy. Okay, so not even kidding, like over 100 pages is like the main story, and then like about like 25, 30 pages is the Horrorland stuff. And so it completely transitions to them getting in a car, like the mom and dad are driving Brittany and Molly to the Horrorland because they got these free passes in the mail. They don't know how they got them, but it's just like uh, all the kids like love going to Horrorland, and so it's like, yeah, totally. And along the way, Molly's telling Brittany about her friends, saying like they went to all these attractions, like the quicksand. There's like this quicksand beach with actual real quicksand. Um, and there was like this werewolf petting zoo. It was like too real to believe and all this stuff. Um, and so they go there. Uh, it's kind of like there's all these like gotcha moments where it's like you think something wrong's gonna happen, like they're gonna get like killed or something horrible's gonna happen, but it's all like these jokes, just like you're like, oh, we gotcha, we're just messing with you and stuff, and all the like the guards and everyone that's running the Horrorland are like these green kind of orc looking. They have like these horns, and they're just like these monsters, and they're kind of very deadpan with the humor. Like, he's like, oh, we like, one of them's like walking him through the park is like, like sometimes uh he's talking about the perks. He's like, oh, it's a great job and everything, it's good benefits, and then sometimes they let me eat as any children I can grab and that kind of stuff. They go to what they think is an ice cream vendor, and it's like there's eyeball ice cream. It was like they're eating it as there's like he's like, do you want regular or blood splattered? And it was like, well, they all go for like the regular one. Just blood splatter sounds terrible. Um, and so they're eating. It's like, oh, this kind of tastes like a vanilla ice cream for the most part. It's kind of funny. It's like, then what else does it taste like? And it's various stuff. There's a kind of a cool, not really an Easter egg, but it's a nice nod. Like they find like this shop that has these Halloween masks, and that's kind of a nod to the haunted mask, the classic Goosebumps book. Because they go in, it's like, oh wow, the masks feel very warm, and all of them are masks of kids, very realistic looking. And they go into the shop, and then they see like, hey, those look like us. And then the lady monster behind her is like, yeah, it actually does look like you. Like, that's interesting. Do you guys want to try them on? And his scare your parents is like, nah, they're fine. And they kind of walk away. And then they find this one of those old school fortune teller machines, like in the movie Big. So they put in like a coin, and it like supposed to read your fortune, and it turns over a card that's blank, and the fortune teller says like oh, there's nothing there, you have no future. And she's talking to Brittany, and it's like, and then like they kind of laugh out like, oh, I'm sure all the cards were empty and this nothing. What is interesting, they find is a recurring thing that happens is all the people they meet, even the fortune teller machine refers to Brittany with her real name, like everyone knows her name, and so they like, it's like, oh, I'm sure there's some good explanation or something. And the parents kind of bring up again, like, how did you get the free passes? What did you do? He's like, I don't know. And so the dad is very straightforward. His tunnel vision. He's like, he just wants to go to the hotel. It's called the Stagger Inn. This play on words, staggering. So he wants to like, oh, I forgot. When they're about to go through the gate to the place, they have like their suitcases, and then they're about to leave, and then they've left the suitcases there, and they're telling the guy at the ticket counter, like, hey, is anybody gonna help us with our suitcases? And he says, he's like, oh, where you guys going? You're not gonna need them. And then he pulls out like this blowtorch and just like incinerates the suitcases. And it's like, whoa. And then dad's like, whoa, what's going on? And then the mom's reassures him, like, oh, I'm sure it's just a joke. Like, once we go to the hotel, they're going to have our suitcases and stuff. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And so they get a cab that takes them to the inn, and it's this whole thing where like the cabbie's just like, he's turning the wheel frantically. He's like, I don't know what to tell you guys. This has never happened before. And then he's like, the brakes aren't working, and the steering is all messed up. And it's like, I'm really sorry about this, folks. So he jumps out the car, and he like and then it looks like they're about to hit a brick wall, and then all of a sudden, like, the car stops, and he runs back into the thing, and all the doors open, and it's shown it's like it was on a track, and it was all just a joke. And he's like, oh, you know, this is pretty funny. There's a lot of moments like that. It gets pretty predictable. Like, it looks like they're gonna be in danger, but it's all just kind of a joke. So they finally go into the hotel. Still no suitcases, by the way. So that never gets, but it doesn't even matter, because the parents get into their room, and then they tell Molly, like, oh, you, all the special guests stay on floor 13. And so there's never floor 13, so, but, it's, why it's done. So they go to the room, and then they find like all this awesome stuff, like this huge bed with like 16 pillows. They go in the closet, and they find like all these designer clothes and stuff. It's like wow, I'm glad, like, I hope we never find the suitcases. All these clothes are awesome. What's interesting to know, it's they find like nowhere in the room, not even in the closet, there's a mirror. So I'm sure that's gonna be a plot point later on in the series. It's not explained right now. And so, and then they find like, like there's a bunch of candy bars, and there's like it's pretty amazing. It sounds really cool. Like, I wouldn't mind staying there. And so they're like, hey, there's still some time before sundown, so we let's go have some fun in the park, and let's go find our parents and see how they're doing. And then so they go into the room, and then they find the door kind of like slightly ajar, and Brittany's like, that's unusual, because my dad always makes a habit of closing the door like the parents are gone. It's like, what happened? And so they go to the front desk, and the front desk assures them that they actually just checked out. It's like, did they say anything? No, they seemed like they were in a hurry. And I don't know what to tell you. It's like they checked out. This happens all the time, whatever. And so they're like, oh, okay. And then they're like, let's go check the room again to see if they just stepped out or something. And then they go back, and then they find like the door was a little bit more open than it was, and they find that there was a camera in there, and there's a picture of Slappy, and it was with her parents, and it's like, oh, and then they basically they run off to find out what happens, and then it kind of ends there with like them trying to find out what happened to the parents. And so it's kind of interesting. It's and then it really kind of gets you into wanting to read the next one. And so because the whole thing is part of this long plot. Each one can stand alone, but it is eventually going to culminate. And from what I gather, is the last two books of the 12 book series are going to be completely set in Horrorland, so you can find out what happens to all the kids. So I think it's a really cool idea. It adds extra incentive to read the other books in the series, other than just kind of like cherry pick stuff like, oh, it seems interesting, and then skip this one. So it's the first official crossover between the Goosebumps monsters and stuff, and so it's kind of like a extra treat for longtime fans who are just interested in these characters, especially Slappy, and so he shows up multiple times. And so it's like it was made to appeal to fans and stuff. So yeah, so that was Revenge of the Living Dummy. I highly recommend it to fans of the character Slappy. I mean, who doesn't love this guy? He's like a character you love to hate. But it's really great if you very interested in the crossover aspect. If you liked Horrorland, it's really good. So, alright, so thanks for watching, and look forward to next week for the second episode in the classic series where we review Stay Out of the Basement. Alright, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.